Let's get started. I think more people will be joining in some time. So welcome everyone. I'm Kirti Rao, Evidence Impact Specialist at the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation, or 3IE. 3IE is a global leader in developing evidence on how to effectively transform the lives of the poor in low and middle income countries. We work closely with governments, foundations, NGOs, development institutions, and research organizations to address their decision-making needs. With offices in Washington, DC, New Delhi, London, and a global network of leading researchers, we at 3IE offer deep experience across our extensive menu of evaluation and evidence services. On behalf of 3IE, I welcome you all to this gLOCAL event about how we are using process evaluation to strengthen monitoring and evaluation of women's empowerment projects that are part of our Swashakt program. Today's presenters are my colleagues Jane Hammaker and Shreya Banerjee, who are both senior research associates at 3IE. You'll find a little bit more about them in the chat in a moment. Before we get further, let me begin with a few brief housekeeping notes. We'll be recording the session and also live streaming it. When sending questions to Jane and Shreya on Zoom, please use the Q&A box for your questions and not the chat function. That's for comments and other informal discussions. If the event is disrupted for any reason, we'll shut it down and reach out to you all over email. We would love it if you posted your reflections from this event on social media today. Please tag at 3IE News and use the hashtag #gLOCAL2023. You will hear more about what Swashakt is and how we are using process evaluations in a moment. But before we dive in, please tell us a little bit about yourself. So this is a Zoom poll, and you'll soon see a few questions on your screen. If you can get the Zoom poll started. So you'll be seeing a few questions. We'd love to have some inputs from you here. Are you all able to see the poll? It would be great if you could just tell us a bit about yourselves before we get started. Great. Thank you so much for your active participation in this poll and for being here today. We would be starting with the presentation now, and it's great to see that we have such a diverse audience. So that's it from me, and over to Jane.
Thanks, Kirti, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our session today. Shreya and I are here to talk a little bit about mixed methods research design and impact evaluation, and we'll be focusing on the importance of conducting high quality and rigorous process evaluation. So we'll first review some of the justifications for including process evaluation and impact evaluation as described by 3IE's process evaluation guidelines. And then we'll share some practical applications and learnings on process evaluation using an ongoing 3IE project, the Swashakt Evidence Program, as a case study. Our goal today is to try and answer the following questions. The first is, why should researchers consider integrating process evaluation with impact evaluation? And the second, how can process evaluation support monitoring, evaluation, and learning? So what do we mean by process evaluation? Broadly, process evaluations generate information and findings on how interventions are implemented. And in the context of impact evaluation, this definition doesn't change much. The core function of a process evaluation is that it may help explain the positive, negative, significant, insignificant, or unexpected results of an impact evaluation. So in other words, a process evaluation can help researchers and evaluators describe the who, what, when, where, and how of intervention effects, context, etc. So process evaluations do this by identifying and analyzing some of the internal and external elements of intervention design and implementation that influence a project's expected impact. And we have some examples here on the slide of some of the different elements of a project that may affect its outcomes. For instance, problem analysis or program design. If the analysis of the problem that the intervention is trying to solve or target doesn't match the actual reality of the situation, a process evaluation can help uncover some of those contextual factors that might downstream influence outcomes of an impact evaluation. Another example, an intervention's implementation or sociocultural, environmental, or economic factors might also influence the project in ways that might ultimately influence the outcomes of an impact evaluation. So 3IE's process evaluation guidelines recommend that quantitative impact evaluation incorporate process evaluation by applying mixed method designs that combine both types of research methods. So while quantitative instruments are key to breadth, reproducibility, and generalizability of research, qualitative methods contribute depth and rich description. And neither quantitative nor qualitative can achieve those objectives in isolation. So that's why it's so important that to have both elements in evaluation. So that was a very brief overview run through of process evaluation. If you'd like to learn more about some of the theoretical underpinnings of process evaluation, you should definitely check out 3IE's process evaluation guidelines, which I will link in the chat, or I believe Kirti will link in the chat if you don't mind, Kirti, or ask us any questions at the end. Okay, so before we jump into the applications of process evaluation, I'll just quickly introduce our case study, 3IE's ongoing Swashakt evidence program. So Swashakt funds a portfolio of 9 women's rural livelihoods interventions implemented by NGOs across 10 states of India. Each project involves the formation or scale up of women's collective enterprises. And while each intervention is unique, they all contain similar components. Projects provide working capital and a range of assets, such as equipment or centralized processing facilities. They also generally conduct capacity building activities, such as technical trainings, business development trainings, or leadership trainings to participants. The working capital, assets, and training support the formation or scale up of collective enterprises that support the production of various products, some of which you can see on this screen. I'm not sure if my video here of a woman spinning has started, but now you can see in action. Products range from the production of millets in Orissa in the bottom right corner to spinning wool in Rajasthan, handloom weaving in Telangana, and producing tea and pickle in West Bengal. Each product has a very unique value chain, which can vary greatly by project. For example, in West Bengal, women are highly involved in the growing and harvesting of tea, while in Rajasthan, women are only involved in a few steps of the wool spinning process. The social, cultural, and economic norms also vary tremendously by state and even by district in some cases. Each project aims to support women in producing higher value products and creating sustainable and profitable market and institutional partnerships in order to sell their unique products. And that's kind of the overall goal of all of the projects in the portfolio. And before implementation began, the 9 project teams met virtually to develop a portfolio-wide theory of change. I won't go into the specifics of the theory of change, but in general, it proposes that these investments in capacity and working capital will enable women to acquire and apply business and technical skills needed to form and sustain these enterprises, increase their production capacity and the quality of products sold. Increased earnings and profits will improve outcomes such as women's household income, decision-making, mobility, confidence, and self-efficacy, along with the production capacity and profits of their enterprises. Our research questions in the evaluation explore the effects of participating in these collective enterprises and describe their implementation to contribute to the evidence base on women's livelihoods and collective enterprise models. And to answer these questions, we propose a mixed method design to evaluate 5 of the 9 projects using quantitative and qualitative data. Our quantitative approach is supported by a process evaluation to better answer questions on how programs were implemented or are being implemented, barriers and facilitators of implementation, and to investigate some of the sociocultural, economic, and institutional factors that might influence project outcomes. So I'll talk a little bit about our process evaluation methods before we dive deeper into the case study. To develop our process evaluation, we first developed a pre-analysis plan that outlined the evaluation's research questions and some of the tools. We developed interview guides for conducting in-depth interviews, like the one seen in the photo on the left, focus group discussions, like you can see on the right, and key informant interviews for our qualitative research team to administer to a wide range of participants, from like actual participants in the projects to program staff to community mobilizers and other important stakeholders. These interviewed guides were designed to collect information on participants, their context, and program implementation to better understand project outcomes. The tools were piloted in the field with a few respondents at first, and then iterations were made before the tools were submitted for IRB approval. And once those tools were approved, we began conducting our field visits late last year to project locations. So interviews were recorded and transcribed and coded using a coding framework. We conducted a systematic thematic analysis in NVivo, which is a qualitative software. And we're in the process of compiling findings to inform our baseline report. That was a super, again, brief rundown of some of the methods that we were using on our process evaluation. So if there are questions on the methods, we'd be happy to talk about that more in the question and answer session at the end. But okay, that concludes our quick review of process evaluations, some theoretical benefits of using them in impact evaluation, and a summary of our case study. I will now hand the mic over to my colleague Shreya to present some of the more important learnings from the process evaluation implemented as a part of the Swashakt evidence program. So over to you, Shreya. Ooh, Shreya, are you speaking? I can't hear you. Is it me?
No, your audio isn't working, Shreya. Can you check once again?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. As Jane mentioned, I will be sharing some learnings from the Swashakt process evaluations to demonstrate how they can be useful and how they're contributing to the Swashakt evaluations. So the first important contribution of the process evaluation was to help us understand the sociocultural and the economic context of the intervention areas better. We, of course, had some quantitative data on women's mobility agency from our baseline survey, but the process evaluation really helped us understand the societal context better, the gender norms and the cultural norms that dictate the extent of freedom and mobility these women have. We also observed that these gender norms and cultural norms vary across not just different states, but also different districts within one state. For example, for one of our projects, we learned that women participants in 2 out of 4 of our intervention districts had a lot more freedom and agency in comparison to the other 2. To be specific, the norms and the societal context in Alipurduar district in West Bengal, which had a large Nepali population, and in Kandhamal in Orissa, which had a largely tribal population, were considerably different from the other 2 project locations. In these 2 areas, we saw that women traditionally went out to work and they generally had a lot more mobility and freedom. We even spoke to their husbands as part of our qualitative interviews to understand what they had to say. And we learned that they were also supportive of their wives working and bringing in an income, unlike in the other intervention areas like Rajasthan, for example. Another thing we observed was that in Rajasthan, older women had more freedom and agency and mobility than younger women, because a lot of family members spoke about how they were afraid of their daughters eloping or getting kidnapped. So what we're trying to say here is that process evaluation really helped us to not only ground truth some of our quantitative findings, but also to understand the societal context of the intervention locations better. Our process evaluation visits also helped us understand if there were any other interventions in the area currently or in the past. These could be other interventions by other organizations, whether it's government or private. For one of our projects, we observed that nearly all of the women participants were part of SHGs before. SHGs are self-help groups. So they already understood the concept of being a part of a group, coming together for meetings. This, of course, meant that the mobilization process was easier for the implementation partner. This also meant that the uptake of the intervention was better, which could eventually help us see impact. In the weaving clusters in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, which are two states in the south of India, the process evaluation showed us what the presence of a master weaver in the area meant for the program. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, a master weaver is an entrepreneur who employs wage labor to produce clothing and sell it in the market. So what we learned was that most women members of the producer company used to work for master weavers before they joined the producer company, and they left before better pay. So in our interviews, some women also said that there were other women who wanted to leave the master weaver and join the producer company. They couldn't do so because they had taken loans from the master weaver and hadn't repaid them. So they were bound to them in a way. We also observed differences in caste dynamics in the intervention areas, as well as within the collectives to an extent. In Rajasthan and also other states, we saw clear divisions of work based on caste. We saw that spinning was done by specifically 3 caste groups in the intervention villages. For tie-dye, which is a craft practice in Rajasthan and Gujarat in India, which some of you might know about. So we saw this was done by, again, very specific caste groups in the area. In fact, we also learned that tying was done by members of a specific community and the dyeing was done by another, which was quite interesting to learn about. Implementation partners also spoke about how selecting the location of training and also meetings in Rajasthan had to be done while keeping caste dynamics in mind. This is because members belonging to one caste group living in one hamlet are sometimes unwilling to go to another caste group's hamlet in order to attend a training or meeting. So the location, the selection of the location was crucial in order to ensure attendance and participation and eventually uptake of the program itself. The process evaluation also helped us understand the changes in sources of livelihood over the years, the market demand, and other factors that also play a role in the uptake of the intervention, as well as the production process as a whole. So I'll share an example here. Our quantitative baseline data showed us that in Rajasthan, older women were more involved in spinning as compared to younger women. So we wanted to understand why this was the case. Through our qualitative interviews, we learned that there had been a decrease in market demand for hand-spun products over the years. So of course, the demand for raw wool also decreased. This meant that women started getting less orders, so they started doing less spinning work. The Indira Gandhi Canal was also built around the same time, so agriculture also became a viable source of income for the families. So on the one hand, there was a decrease in market demand for hand-spun products and for raw wool. And on the other hand, there was also a decrease in, there were more alternate sources of livelihood available to the women. So this meant that the older women stopped spinning, and so the daughters just never ended up picking up the skill from their mothers. So now that these women are being trained, implementers are noticing that more older women know the skill, but younger women don't. So what the process evaluation did here was, it helped us understand the story behind the numbers better that we saw in our data and basically answer the why question. The picture you see on the slides here is a picture of women spinning in Rajasthan. Yeah. The process evaluation was also crucial in helping us understand the actual implementation process better and the different kinds of challenges that implementers and participants face, and also the facilitators. I'll highlight some of these facilitators and barriers now. Women's access to other employment opportunities in the village had an impact on how easy the mobilization process was, and also the women's eventual participation in the program. So these projects primarily target women from marginalized communities for whom foregoing a day's wage isn't always easy or feasible. So this was proving to be a problem in some of the project locations where women traditionally went out to work outside their homes. So women who work in tea gardens in West Bengal or did agricultural wage work in, say, Rajasthan, were reluctant to come for trainings and meetings sometimes, as told to us by the field teams. The local community mobilizer for one of the projects also said that it was hard to explain the long-term benefits of being part of a producer company or a farmer producer company and the concept of share profits to the women. So this was a challenge the implementation partner faced. Women's domestic and childcare responsibilities, of course, also have an impact on their participation. Across project locations across India, women also spoke about how domestic responsibilities get in the way, and it is sometimes hard for them to come away and come for meetings or for trainings or for production activities, especially if they don't have enough support at home. Support from the community and family also impacts participation, as one would assume. Not just participation, the implementation process as a whole. This also varies greatly across contexts. In some districts in Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, and West Bengal, we found a few women spoke about how their husbands or family members had issues with them joining initially. In fact, the community mobilizer also told us about how she had to spend more time getting the husbands on board with their wives joining in some of the areas. However, in other areas like Alipurduar in West Bengal, for example, we found that husbands and family members were more supportive of women working. In the same areas, we observed that the village heads and the panchayat members also came across as being more supportive of the program as a whole, which could, of course, also have an impact on the implementation process. In some of the more remote villages, availability of transport was an issue for women, especially if the production center or the location of the training was far and not in the village itself. Apart from the distance and availability of transport, another factor that impacted things were safety concerns. Some women expressed their concern with traveling for trainings and for production activities. The field team in one village in a district in West Bengal spoke about how she had to reassure them that they would in fact be taken to the training location and not anywhere else, and there would be other women with them, with her. All of these factors have an influence on the implementation process as well as on women's involvement in the program, like their participation in trainings, meetings, exposure visits, and also exhibitions like the one you see in the picture on the slide. Tim, could you change the slide? Thank you. The process evaluation also helped us understand the program context as well as the different collectivization models and how they differ from each other. There were small things we learned, like how the distance to the production center impacted participation of women, how some districts have workshops or common facility centers and some don't. So benefits of participation in the program might be experienced differently based on women's access to resources, in this case, access to a workspace. In other words, there might be some heterogeneity in impact. Most importantly, we understood the collectivization models better, like I mentioned earlier. For all the models, for all the different intervention models, it helped us to really understand the value chain better, the production processes, which activities in the value chain take place at which location. For example, does it happen at the village level or the producer company level, or is the work outsourced? What was also important for us to understand was the gender division of roles within the value chain. to answer questions like, are the women also involved in marketing, management, and decision-making activities, or are they just involved in production activities, whether it's crafts or spice processing? Our findings showed that this varied across collectives and depended upon things like gender norms in the intervention area, the craft or the kind of intervention it is, the stage the collective is at, among other things. For example, in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, where the craft clusters are, the weaving clusters are, men were primarily involved in the pre-loom activities and women were involved in the weaving activities on the loom. In contrast, in Rajasthan, men traditionally did the weaving, whereas women were only involved in the spinning of the yarn. So the finding was that roles in the production process are fairly gendered. The programs intended to set up a more gender inclusive value chain, but it seems to be a challenge for implementation partners to bring about a change in gender norms and start involving women in activities they were traditionally not doing. So what you see in the previous slide is a woman spinning a yarn before the weaving happens. In the next slide is the loom setting process, which is part of the pre-loom activities. This is done by men. And the next slide is of women weaving at the producer company. This is the common facility center or the production center where women weave saris and other products. Then will now talk about some ways in which our process evaluation helped inform our larger evaluation design. Over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Shreya. And fun fact, I believe Shreya bought the sari being woven on the left for her grandmother. So we have that one. It looks amazing. All right. So building off of Shreya, while these findings add value to answering our research questions to explore the nuance of implementation, which provided valuable insights both for the evaluation and for implementers, we were also able to apply some of our learnings from the ongoing process evaluation to adjust our evaluation design. So by better understanding the intensity and scope of the intervention, we were able to sort of adjust and modify our subsequent data collection tools to gather additional information on women's participation at the village level and the district level, along with the structure of the collectives, as Shreya described. And as Shreya also described, explore some of the heterogeneity that we found in our baseline outcomes. So for example, in this graph on the left, you can see that there are some pretty large differences in women's income, one of our outcomes by district, caste, and age. So we were able to explore dig a little bit deeper into these differences by monitoring our qualitative survey instruments and follow-up data collection exercises. We were also able to adopt our targeting strategy to identify participants that were more involved in the project and differentiated involvement at the district and village level activities. And then finally, we were able to ground truth some of our findings from the quantitative baseline surveys by verifying key demographic characteristics, for example, education or age of participants, and their confidence in making decisions in the household, enterprise, and community, as well as their mobility. Oh, and here's some more fun pictures of block printing, weaving training, and women collective members gathering for another training. Okay, so what to take away if you're interested in conducting a process evaluation? Here are a few things that we've learned while in the process of implementing a PE. First up is conducting field visits early in the implementation process. This was really important to make sure that the evaluation team has a really strong understanding of the intervention and program logic model, and start some of that verification of demographic context of participants to inform research tools. Second, we found it was really important to conduct some outcome mapping exercises early on in the process to ensure that process evaluation research tools, and when I say process evaluation, I feel like we're we're sort of interchangeably talking about qualitative tools, process evaluation tools. Our process evaluation tools are qualitative tools, so that's why we keep going back and forth. But anyway, aligning those qualitative tools with the quantitative baseline tools and monitoring can make it really easy to synthesize information and learning and create kind of a learning feedback loop. So since we're collecting information across 3 different sources, we found that was really helpful to have a strong outcome mapping exercise to qualitative themes and sub-themes in the beginning of the project. Third is kind of a basic qualitative research recommendation, but try to avoid or challenge the assumptions that you might have when approaching a context, and avoid assumptions that you might have about the reality of implementation. Keep an open mind. Important to identify all relevant stakeholders, not just participants in the project when conducting process evaluation. You need participants and program staff, but also other key community members that might have a say or influence in project implementation, so you get the most complete picture possible. And then finally, communicate findings to implementation partners as they come, so that everyone can learn from the process from the research process. Okay, and that's all the content that we have for you. We went a little faster than we planned, but we've got plenty of time for questions, and I think there are a few questions. So I'm happy to kick that off. Oh, Kirti, you want to come in? Go ahead.
Great. Thanks so much, Shreya, Jane. Excellent presentation, I think, even if I say so myself. And we have some questions coming in. So how shall we do it? Shall I just read out these questions, and would you like to kind of take them live? So
yeah,
great.
That works.
Great. So we have a question from Manveen Kohli. I'm going with the last one first. What was the timeline for the process evaluation? Shreya, I think your audio.
Yeah, I think your audio came out. You want to try again?
No?
It's better. You're back.
Okay. Sorry about that. So we started in October 2021. I think it was around that time. So we had breaks because of COVID, which was also one of the challenges that we faced. But it started in October and it went on over the course of last year and got completed around October last year. Of course, it wasn't continuous. We went in batches to different states. Yeah.
Great. And we have another question from an anonymous attendee. They're asking, could you share what kind of challenges you faced in conducting the process evaluation?
Okay, I can take that. Am I audible?
Yes.
So I think one challenge in some of the locations was mobilizing women to come for FGDs and interviews, and also maintaining homogeneity in the FGD group. I think sometimes was an issue. Some women weren't speaking, so of course that was an issue. There were women who were more active, like the SHG leaders, and there were some women who were participants of the program but weren't able to speak up as much. So making sure we got everybody's perspective in was sometimes a challenge. Yeah, I think that was one main challenge. Also, we depended heavily on implementers to facilitate a lot of the data collection process. So their presence was always there. So I think that may have been a bit of an issue. Yeah. Apart from that, I think making sure we got the women at the right time, at the time that was convenient for them to conduct interviews or FDs was also crucial, because a lot of these women worked, and yeah. And I think I mentioned this earlier also. So they also lose out on wages if we ask them to not go to work and come and do an interview for us or participate in FPDs. So we had to be sensitive about the time that we took from the women and the time at which we spoke to them. Yeah, these are some of the challenges I can think of. Yeah. In case anyone wants to come in, yeah.
Yeah, I can add one more challenge, since I wasn't a part of making those visits to the field, but something the process of like recording, transcribing, translating, and coding, creating like a framework for that just required a lot of planning. And a lot of that was led by Asta Dang, who's not with us today, but she sort of organized a team to code and develop the training around coding using the software I mentioned called NVivo, which is a bit cumbersome, but that was also a challenge, was just getting everyone up to speed and familiar with the codes so that you can apply them consistently, and then conduct your thematic analysis based on the themes and sub-themes in the coding framework. Yeah, not a challenge in so much as it's just requires a lot of logistics and some training and technical leadership to make sure that the wealth and depth and deep descriptive information that you're gathering from these field visits can be systematically sort of applied and organized and integrated in with our impact evaluation. So yeah, doing that can be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, going by the rich information that you presented today, I think it might be just easy to get lost in all of those details, right? Great points. So another question that we have, and I think I'm going to combine a question that's coming from Imtiaz Ayub, which I think is also about this, and what an anonymous attendee has asked. So are there examples where findings from the process evaluation, are there more examples where these findings have helped implementers kind of reorient how they deliver the intervention? Have there been any such examples? Or if I can put it differently, were there examples where you fed back some of these findings with implementers and there was like a dialogue on that?
Sure, that's a fantastic question. I think ideally that learning should be cyclical, right? Like there should be, we call it monitoring, evaluation, and learning, because it's supposed to be a triage of information and dissemination and communication. In this specific project, since we're evaluators and funding implementation, 3AU was sort of in a challenging position of like, how do we keep preserve the integrity of the evaluation while also ensuring that implementation is done to the best that it can be. And I think the apex of that issue is kind of monitoring and structuring conversations around monthly or biweekly check-ins, involving the implementing partners in designing the data collection tools. The implementing partners participate in all of the interviews. And so there is sort of those opportunities for feedback. And I think when our team visited the field and met with staff and held those meetings in person with teams, they were able to communicate some of their findings and observations from the ground to try and tighten implementation without compromising the evaluation. Shreya, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it.
Excellent. There's another question from Malika Biswas. She's asking, since you had a long time on the ground, would you have preferred the ethnography method? And if not, why so?
I can start us off maybe on that. So I think for process evaluations, while I think ethnography is a great method to really understand context better and ground realities better, and the women's realities better, it's not always feasible to do an ethnography as part of a process evaluation. I think budget constraints is definitely a factor, and to have researchers spend that kind of time on the field is often difficult unless you have a designated researcher on the field to do that kind of ethnographic research. So for us, that wasn't feasible, and also I don't think it's traditionally done as part of process evaluations. Jane, you want to come in, or anyone else?
Great. I think that's probably all the questions that our attendees asked. But if I may, I also had one question. So I think, what were some of the routines that you had to ensure that the wealth of findings kind of could be organized and kind of fed into the evaluations? I think you already mentioned technical leadership, but if you want to throw light on some more.
So again, Shreya led this, so I'll let her answer more substantively. But something that comes to mind immediately, Kirti, is the process of recording field notes and preparing field reports. So for the team that wasn't in the field, it was very, very helpful that the researchers who were there did a very nice job, like recording and documenting things as they happen and sharing and disseminating those findings with the research team so that we could quickly learn about implementation and sociocultural, environmental, economic context, all those important things. I found that super, super helpful, just aggressive documentation. Shreya, do you want to expand on that? Oh no, I can't hear you, Shreya. No.
So I think
You're back on.
Okay, so so we made that a routine. Like every field visit was followed by an elaborate field report, which was shared with the larger evaluation team. So everybody could understand what was happening with the implementation process, not just the implementation process, but also like a detailed report on what the ground realities were, what the societal context was, what the economic context was. So we had field reports going out to the entire team every time someone was on field for the process evaluation interviews. So I think that really helped. Keeping everyone in the loop, and so that information was constantly being fed back to the team. Thanks for the question, Geeti.
Great. Thank you so much, Shreya, Jane. I think this was really interesting to me. And I can see that, with the participation of the audience, I think they were also super interested in these, these reflections that you've shared on process evaluations. I think that's all the questions we have right now. And so it's been great hearing your experiences. I think we are ending slightly earlier than scheduled, but I think we'll all be glad to have more time in the day. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. If you'd like to know more about 3i's work on gender and women's empowerment, please, I'm sharing, a few links in the chat. Do visit our gender and women's empowerment page on our website. And also do subscribe to our updates, our newsletter, to be notified of all the latest work on this project. Our gender and women's empowerment page is right here in the link that I'm just sharing. Trying to do both together. Thanks so much, everyone. It's been great having you. I'm just going to check. Oh, there's been a few last minute questions that have come in from Deepa Bisht. So maybe we can slow down a bit. So I think Deepa has asked, what is your sample design and distribution for this study? And she has also added that please respond to this query before closing. So I think, yeah, great. Thanks, Deepa, for sharing this question. And over to Shreya, Jane. So sample design and distribution.
Sure. Shreya, do you want to talk a little bit more about how participants in the focus group discussions and key informant, or actually I can talk about the key informants and in-depth interviews, and you can talk about focus groups. So the key informant interviews were conducted with participants in the projects, and these were generally selected by the implementation partners. Oh wait, I'm so sorry. That's in-depth interview, isn't it? Maybe I'll let Shreya cover the whole thing because I always confuse KIIs and IDIs. So over to you, Shreya.
So our aim was to basically interview participants of the program along with their family members husbands primarily, along with implementers. So, so we interviewed the management of the implementation partners. So we interviewed them. We interviewed field staff, so including community mobilizers, production coordinators, field coordinators, to understand from them the kind of challenges they were facing. So these were all key informant interviews. We also interviewed somebody from the panchayat. So either it was a village head or a panchayat member, to understand if they knew about the program, or if they were supportive of the program, what their thoughts were of a program like this, of women working, their outlook generally. So that was one part of it. And we also did focus group discussions with participants, with women from all of the project locations. And we did in-depth interviews as well with the women, with a subsection of these women who are also part of the FGTs, as well as their husbands. So we could also understand the kind of family support, the kind of views the men in the society had towards women working, towards women participating in a program like this. Yeah, so this was our general strategy sample, and how we selected our sample. So Deepa, we basically wanted to make sure we covered all stakeholders, and we had a minimal sample, like a minimum number of people that we selected. And every time we felt that there was a saturation, that we found that a lot of the women were saying the same things and the same outputs, inputs were coming in from the interviews or the FGTs, we stopped it. So we had a general sample that we kept in mind based on number one, purposeful sampling. Yeah, Jane. So we had of course, it was purposeful. We selected the people in a purposeful way. In terms of the numbers, we selected, we had a basic number that we went by, and if we felt the need to add or interview more people, we did that. If we felt like the responses were repeating, we stopped it. I think that is generally the process followed in qualitative interviews. It's not about the numbers, it's about the information that you get. And eventually when it starts repeating, you can consider stopping, and also interviewing other people if you feel the need to do so. I hope that answers your question.
I think Deepa has a follow-up question if it's decided on the basis of population. But I think Deepa, as Shreya answered, it's based on the kind of aspects that we feel that adding an additional participant would cover, would provide. So it wasn't decided on the basis of population in the district, etc. We have another last minute question from Imtiaz. He's asking for elaboration of the approach for the quantitative sampling. So I think, Imtiaz, we'd be happy to share our protocol for the quantitative evaluations is available. It's actually available on RIDE, which is the 3I Registry of Impact Evaluations, and you can see all the details of the approach that we followed for quantitative sampling on that document. It's fairly detailed, and we are talking about 3 ongoing projects that 3I is evaluating. There are 5 projects, but 3 of them are what 3I is evaluating, and you can find details of those. So they're slightly different for each of the projects. And it might be best to look at the RIDE the registry on RIDE. We'll share a link for that in the chat in a moment. And this has been very exciting, getting questions in the last minute. So I'm just going to wait for a moment to see if there are more questions coming in. And also at the same time, I'm going to be quickly picking up the registry, provide a link to the RIDE where you can search for the Swashakt, registered protocol. And hope that answers your question, Imtiaz. And I think that does bring us to the end of this event. We don't have any further questions, but it's been super exciting engaging with all your questions. And thanks so much for being here today and for your active participation. Thanks again to Jane and Shreya. We look forward to giving you more updates about this on 3i newsletter and other channels. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.